أحدهما تحت الكساء. اللهم صل محمد وآل محمد. فأقبل عند ذلك أبو الحسن علي بن أبي طالب وقال: السلام عليك يا بنت رسول الله. فقلت: وعليك السلام يا أبا الحسن ويا أمير المؤمنين. فقال: يا فاطمة إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة أخي وابن عم رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله. فقلت: نعم، ها هو مع ولديك تحت الكساء. فأقبل علي نحو الكساء وقال: السلام عليك يا رسول الله، وأتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء؟ قال له: وعليك السلام يا أخي ويا وسيي وخليفتي وصاحب لوائي، قد أذنت لك. فدخل علي تحت الكساء. اللهم صل على محمد وآله. ثم آتيت نحو الكساء وقلت: السلام عليك يا أبتاه يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء؟ قال: وعليك السلام يا بنتي ويا بضعتي، قد أذنت لك. فدخلت تحت الكساء. اللهم صل على محمد وآله. فلما اكتملنا جميعا تحت الكساء أخذ برسول الله بطرفي الكساء وأومى بيده اليمنى إلى السماء وقال: اللهم إن هؤلاء أهل بيتي وخاصتي وحامتي، لحمهم لحمي ودمهم دمي، يؤلمني ما يؤلمهم ويحزنني ما يحزنهم. أنا حرب لمن حاربهم وسلم لمن سالمهم وعدو لمن عاداهم ومحب لمن أحبهم. إنهم مني وأنا منهم، فاجعل صلواتك وبركاتك ورحمتك وغفرانك ورضوانك علي وعليهم، وأذهب عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل محمد وآله. فقال الله عز وجل: يا ملائكتي ويا سكان السماوات، إني ما خلقت السماء مبنيا ولا أرضا مدحيا ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضية ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا في محبة هؤلاء الخمسة الذين هم تحت الكساء. فقال الأمين جبرائيل: يا رب ومن تحت الكساء؟ فقال عز وجل: هم أهل بيت النبوة ومأدن الرسالة، هم فاطمة وأبوها وبعلها وبنوها. اللهم صل على محمد وآله. فقال جبرائيل: يا رب أتأذن لي أن أحبط إلى الأرض لأكون معهم سادسا؟ فقال الله: نعم، قد أذنت لك. فهبط الأمين جبرائيل وقال: السلام عليك يا رسول الله. العلي الأعلى يكرهك السلام ويخصك بالتحية والإكرام ويقول لك: وعزتي وجلالي إني ما خلقت السماء مبنيا ولا أرضا مدحيا ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضية ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا لعجلكم ومحبتكم، وقد أذن لي أن أدخل معكم، فهل تأذن لي يا رسول الله؟ فقال رسول الله: وعليك السلام يا أمين وحي الله. فإنه نعم، قد أذنت لك. فدخل جبرائيل معنا تحت الكساء فقال لأبي: إن الله قد أوحى إليكم يقول: إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. اللهم صل محمد وآله. فقال علي لأبي: يا رسول الله أخبرني ما لجلوسنا هذا تحت الكساء من الفضل عند الله. فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وآله: والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واستفاني بالرسالة نجيا، ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيتنا ومحبينا إلا ونزلت عليهم الرحمة وحفت بهم الملائكة واستغفرت لهم إلى أن يتفرقوا. فقال علي عليه السلام: إذا والله فزنا وفاز شيعتنا ورب الكعبة. فقال أبي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله: يا علي والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا، ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض، وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا، وفيهم محموم إلا وفرج الله حما، ولا مغموم إلا وكشف الله غما، ولا طالب حاجة إلا وقضى الله حاجة. فقال علي عليه السلام: إذا والله فزنا وسعدنا، وكذلك شيعتنا فازوا وسعدوا في الدنيا والآخرة ورب الكعبة. اللهم صل على
بار دیگر صلوات. شمع زندان میں منگا دے کوئی، آخری رات ہے سکینہ کی. شمع زندان میں منگا دے کوئی، آخری رات ہے سکینہ کی. جا رہی ہے حسین کی بیٹی، جا رہی ہے حسین کی بیٹی، آخری رات ہے سکینہ کی. شمع زندان میں منگا دے کوئی، آخری رات ہے سکینہ کی. یہ جو گردن پہ ہے رسن کا نشان، سات تربت میں اس کے جائے گا. کوئی رباب سے کہہ دے اب یہ چہرہ نظر نہ آئے گا. آج جی بھر کے دیکھ لو بی بی، آج جی بھر کے دیکھ لو بی بی، آخری رات ہے سکینہ کی. شمع زندان میں منگا دے کوئی، آخری رات ہے سکینہ کی. پاس بابا کے جانے والی ہے، اب تماچے نہ کوئی مارے گا. قبر میں تو غموں کی ماری کے کوئی گوہر نہیں اتارے گا. جا کے تربت میں چین پائے گی، جا کے تربت میں چین پائے گی، آخری رات ہے سکینہ کی، شمع زندان میں منگا دے کوئی، آخری رات ہے سکینہ کی، ہے جناب امیر کی پوٹی، انتہا اس پہ ہے غریبی کی، عالم نزیہ ہو گیا تاری، سانس رکنے لگی ہے بچی کی، ریسماب تو کھول دو اس کی، ریسماب تو کھول دو اس کی، آخری رات ہے سکینہ کی، شمع زندان میں منگا دے کوئی، آخری رات ہے سکینہ کی، شمع زندان میں منگا دے کوئی، آخری رات ہے سکینہ کی، صلوات۔
برائے خوشنودی ثانی زہرا صلوات۔ اللہم صلی علی محمد۔ بانی اعزا بی بی زینب کی شان میں چند اشعار۔ ضیاء خون شہیدان کی دلکشی زینب، ضیاء خون شہیدان کی دلکشی زینب، حسینیت کے چراغوں کی روشنی زینب، ضیاء خون شہیدان کی دلکشی زینب، کیا وہ راہ میں برتاؤ کلمہ گویوں نے، کیا وہ راہ میں برتاؤ کلمہ گویوں نے، کہ جیسے تھی نہ نواسی رسول کی زینب، حسینیات کے چراغوں کی روشنی زینب اور عزائے شاہ میں ہی زندگی تمام ہوئی، عزائے شاہ میں ہی زندگی تمام ہوئی، نہ اپنے آن محمد کو رو سکی زینب، اور علی کے لال کا لاشا تڑپ اٹھا اس دم، علی کے لال کا لاشا تڑپ اٹھا اس دم، کہ تمہارے بازو میں جس دم رسن بندھی زینب، تمہارے بازو میں جس دم رسن بندھی زینب، وہ کسی نے مارا جو پتھر تو چپ رہی، لیکن کسی نے مارا جو پتھر تو چپ رہی، لیکن کہا جو باغی کسی نے تو رو پڑی زینب، کہا جو باغی کسی نے تو رو پڑی زینب، وہ لہو میں ڈوبی ہوئی بیڑیاں مہاری کی، لہو میں ڈوبی ہوئی بیڑیاں مہاری کی، سفر میں تھام کے دل دیکھتی رہی زینب، سفر میں تھام کے دل دیکھتی رہی زینب، اور حسین چور تھے زخموں سے پھر بھی اٹھ بیٹھے، حسین چور تھے زخموں سے پھر بھی اٹھ بیٹھے، کہا جو شمر نے خیمے سے آ گئی زینب، حجاب میں بھی جہاں سے گزرنا مشکل تھا، حجاب میں بھی جہاں سے گزرنا مشکل تھا، وہاں پہ کیسے کھلے سر کھڑی رہی زینب وہاں پہ کیسے کھلے سر، کھڑی رہی زینب ضیاء خون شہیداں کی دلکشی زینب حسینیت کے چراغوں کی روشنی زینب. بارہ دیگر صلوات.
ختم ہے فصل کماں بول رہی ہے زینب، ختم ہے فصل کماں بول رہی ہے زینب، ختم ہے فصل کماں بول رہی ہے زینب، کون بولے گا جہاں بول رہی ہے زینب، ختم ہے فصل کماں. درود بھیجیے گا محمد وآل محمد پر. چن رہا ہے ادب نہج بلاغہ الفاظ اپنے بابا کی زبان بول رہی ہے زینب، ختم ہے فصل کماں. اور اے یزید سے بڑی ہار تیری کیا ہوگی، وہ تیرا گھر ہے جہاں بول رہی ہے زینب، ختم ہے فصل کماں. درود پڑھیے گا محمد. مدتوں بعد سنا پھر سے علی کا لہجہ، کیسے جھومے نازاں بول رہی ہے زینب، ختم ہے فصل کماں.
اور تیر و شمشیر و سنا ہو کے ستم کا لشکر تھک گئی سب کی زبان بول رہی ہے زینب تھک گئی سب کی زبان.
اور محمد و آل محمد صلوات.
ایک سورہ فاتحہ آپ نے تمام مرحومین کے ساتھ بانی مجلس کے مرحومین کو شامل کر کے بس یہ کہ چند بند ہیں ایک بآواز بلند درود پڑھ دیں. اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد. جب دولت اولاد شہیدی نے لٹا دی، جب دولت اولاد شہیدی نے لٹا دی، اور اپنی بھی گردن رہے خالق میں کٹا دی، اور اپنی بھی گردن رہے خالق میں کٹا دی. نانا کی موادت شاہ بے کس نے دکھا دی، امت کو تہے تیغ بھی بخشش کی دعا دی. جب شمر چڑھا سینے پہ تو یاد خدا تھی، جب ذبح ہوئے بخشش امت کی دعا تھی، جب ذبح ہوئے بخشش امت کی دعا تھی. کہتے تھے پیغمبر کے میرے سر کو اتارا، فرماتے تھے اے در میں ہوا قتل دوبارہ، اور چلاتی تھی زہرا مجھے مارا مجھے مارا. کہتے تھے حسنا جگر ٹکڑے سارا، قاتل نے جو سر سید لولاک کا کاٹا، ایک ٹیک سے سر پنجے تنے پاک کا کاٹا، ایک ٹیک سے سر پنجے تنے پاک کا کاٹا. اور کہتے ہیں کہ جب لٹ گئی زہرا کی کمائی، یعنی کہ ہوئے ذبح شاہ کرب و بلائی، رونے کے لیے فاطمہ پھر لاش پہ آئی، مظلوم کی لاش اس نے عجا شکل میں پائی. زینب تھی نہ بانو تھی نہ سجاد عزیز تھا، اس لاش پہ رونے کے لیے کوئی نہیں تھا، اس لاش پہ رونے کے لیے कोई नहीं था। अलकिस्सा चली फौज सुए गंज शहीदा, मजलूमों के लाशों पे किया जुल्म फरावा, सर काट लिए और बदन कर दिए उर्वा। वो लाशें हकीकत में हुए बेसरो सामा, कुफ्फार ने छोड़ा ना अबा को ना कबा को, लाशों पे उड़ाती थी बुतूल अपनी रिदा को, लाशों पे उड़ाती थी बुतूल अपनी रिदा को। जब लाशों की पामाली पे आधा हुए तैयार, पहुंची ये खबर ख़ैमाए इस्मत में भी अकबा, थी मसनद शाबीर पे गाश नैना बेनाचा, फिजा ने हिला शान को कि उससे ये गुफ्ता, तुम भाई के सर कटने से क्या गश में पड़ी हो, अब होते हैं पामाल हुसैन उठ के खड़ी हो, अब होते हैं पामाल हुसैन उठ के खड़ी हो। फिर बोली सकीना से के ऐ दुख्तर नादा, पामाल हुआ चाहते हैं शाह शहीदा, पामाल हुआ चाहते हैं शाह शहीदा। जाओ पिसरे साथ की मिन्नत करो इस जो कहना गरीबों की तरह कहना मेरी जान। वो सख्त भी कह बैठे तो गम खाई वारे, आबिद को कहीं रन में न बुलवाई वारी, आबिद को कहीं रन में न बुलवाई वारी। अलकिस्सा के जा फौश तलक आई वो खुशा, दिल और भी नन्ना सा उछलने लगा है हाथ, फिर बांध के हाथ अपने कहे शिम्र से ये बात, सैदानी हुआ आगे तेरे जो जोड़ती हूँ हा, तू कर तो चुका कत्ल मोहम्मद के पिसल को, पामाल न कर अब मेरे मजलूम पे दर को, पामाल न कर अब मेरे मजलूम पे दर को। ये मैं नहीं कहती मेरे बाबा को कफन दो, या धूप से लाशे को उठा साए में रख दो। ये चाहती हूँ लाशे पे सदमा न कहीं हो, देखो मेरा सिन और यतीमी मेरी देखो। पैदा हुई जिस दिन से हूँ मैं रंजो बलाए, अब चौथे बरस दाग यतीमी का मिला है, अब चौथे बरस दाग यतीमी का मिला है। जब दौलत औलाद, दुरूद बर मोहम्मद व आले मोहम्मद।
There are a couple of announcements. 23rd annual Majalis-E-Aza of Atlanta is going to be on August 13th, starting with Salatul Zohran at 1:30 p.m. Inshallah in the downtown area. There is a Majalis-E-Aza at the residence of Bilal Rizvi, 207 Windcrest Court, Woodstock, Georgia, next Saturday. not next Saturday actually, August 13th Saturday at 1:30 p.m. both for Mu'mineen and Mu'minat. Please recite aloud Salawat on Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Our speaker for this weekend is Sayyid Bilal Rizvi, who has been lecturing in the United States and across the globe for over 8 years. He has lectured on a number of issues ranging from contemporary challenges, history, social issues, and Islamic belief and theology. He actually studied in the Islamic seminary in the holy city of Najaf. With your loudest of salawat, I would request Sayyid Bilal Rizvi to recite tonight's majlis.
رحم الله من قرأ سورة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. آتنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله، والصلاة والسلام على إمام القبلتين ونبي الحرمين وأفضل الثقلين وجد الحسن والحسين الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد، وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الصادقين والذين ذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على صاحب الدعوة النبوية والصولة الحيدرية والإسمة الفاطمية والحلم الحسنية والشجاعة الحسينية والعبادة السجادية والمآثر الباقرية والآثار الجعفرية والعلوم الكادمية والحجج الردوية والجود التقوية والنقابة النقوية والهيبة العسكرية والغيبة الإلهية. اللهم عجل فرجه وسهل مخرجه. أما بعد، فقد قال الله في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار آيات لأولي الألباب. صدق الله العلي العظيم. For the love of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. For the love of Fatimah al-Zahra in particular, a second salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For the hastening of the reappearance of the master of our time, a louder salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Indeed, when one examines the narrations of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, they'll find that the intellect or the aql has been given a profound position within our narrations. For example, one narration will come forth and it will say that أَوَّلُ مَا خَلَقَ اللَّهُ الْأَقْلِ, that the first creation which Allah He created was the intellect of man. For example, another tradition will say that لَمَّا خَلَقَ اللَّهُ الْأَقْلِ, that when Allah He created the intellect, إِسْتَنْتَقَهُ, that it gave the intellect the ability to understand. So when Allah He gave the intellect the ability to understand, He said to the intellect, أَقْبِلْ فَأَقْبَلْ. He said to it, come forward, so the intellect came forward. Then he said to it, adbir fa'adbar. Then he said to the aql to go backwards, the intellect goes backwards. At that point, when the intellect and the aql, according to this narration, it obeys the commands of Allah, Allah, He says that I have not created a khalq and a creation which is more beloved than you. And then He says, Bika o akib wa bika o tib. That it is through you that I give ajar, and it is through you that I punish mankind. So over here you find, when we examine our narrations, the narrations, they go to show that the defining feature of a human being is the intellect and the aql. That through the aql, insan is able to utilize that knowledge which he has to come to an understanding which he doesn't have. But despite the fact, on one side you find that the narrations, they give a great praise to the aql and the intellect. On the other side, we have other narrations which don't present the intellect in as positive of a light. For example, there's a tradition of Imam Zainul Abidin, where the Imam, he says that inna deen Allah la yusabu bil uqul naqisat, that the deen of Allah cannot be understood by deficient intellects. Or we have certain traditions, for example, that when Abu Hanifa, he comes to Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, when the Imam, he looks at Abu Hanifa, he says, أَأَنْتَ الَّذِي تَقِيسُ الدِّينَ بِرَأْيِكَ? That are you that individual that introduces analogies based on your own opinion into the religion? So over here a discussion arises. On one end, the riwayat, they give the highest of the praise to the aql and the intellect. And then on the other side, the riwayat, they imply that the intellect has limitations. You know, one of the most common discussions we find today is the discussion about the role of aql in understanding the deen of Allah. For example, you'll find that there are many so-called reformist thinkers that say that when it comes to the Shariat of Islam, 1400 years is a long time. That situation which was there 1400 years ago is not the same situation as there is today. So in that regard, we need to use our aql and our intellect, and we need to change certain realities. So the question of discussion tonight is that how do we reply to this reformist thought, and what is the application and the had and the limit of intellect and understanding the deen? And we'll discuss this in a number of stages. From the first level, we'll examine that does the Quran use rational arguments, and are there individuals in the Quran who use the aql and the intellect to establish concepts in the religion? From the second level, we'll examine the relationship between religion and science, which is based on aql. From the third level, we'll examine the role of aql in understanding aqaid and belief. Number four, we'll examine the role of aql in fiqh and Islamic law. And from the fifth level, we'll examine whether one can use intellect to establish a society around you. And based upon these different levels, we'll come to an understanding that what is the application and the limit of aql in understanding the religion. Now, when it comes to this discussion, you find at the first level of this discussion, we need to begin this discussion from the Quran. Because if the Quran uses rational arguments, then we'll come to know that rationality has a place within the religion. You see, when you look at the Quran, there are a number of ayat of the Quran when Allah is seeking to establish His belief in Him, His tawheed, He uses rational arguments. For example, there is an ayat of the Quran that says, لو كان فيهما آلهة إلا الله لفسدتا. That if there was any Allah, if there was any God in the heavens and the earth besides Allah, there would be fasad and corruption. Over here, the Quran is giving you a rational argument. The rational argument is this, is that when you examine this nizam and the system of creation, and you see that there is harmony within the system, This goes to show there is only one creator. Because if there was any other creator, then you would find each would want to impose their system, and when each would want to impose their system, there would be conflict, there would be corruption. So over here, the Quran is presenting a rational argument. No, let's look at another ayat. There's another ayat of the Quran that says, فَلَوْلَا إِذَا بَلَغَتِ الْحُلْقُومِ, that when that time it comes, and the souls of these individuals has reached their throat, وَنَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْكُمْ وَلَكِنْ لَا تُبْصِرُونَ. But at that moment, as you are watching that person on his deathbed, and his soul has reached his throat, the reality of the situation is that we are closer to that individual than all of you. But you do not see how close we are. But then the Quran says, إِن كُنتُمْ غَيْرَ مَدِينِينَ تَرْجِعُونَهَا إِن كُنتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. The Quran, it gives one simple rational argument. It says, O human being, if you think that this Quran is false, and if you think that you have no limits which are placed upon you, then do one simple action. And if you are able to do this one simple action, then this entire book is false. And what is that action? That action is that the moment the soul, it leaves the body of a person, bring that soul back into his body. You see, medical technology can extend the life of a person. You can put them on a ventilator. You can put them on life support. But is there any doctor who can bring the dead back to life today? There is no doctor who is able to bring the dead back to life. So in this method, you see that the Quran is showing you a rational argument. And there is one personality in particular in the Quran, that this personality, time and time again, he used the aql and the intellect to establish the belief in God. And that personality is none other than Nabi Ibrahim. You see, there are many incidents in the life of Nabi Ibrahim where Nabi Ibrahim, he uses rational arguments to establish that there is Allah and that these idols in front of you, they have no value. You know, it's stated that there was a festival. In that festival, all of the people in the town of Ibrahim, they leave. When they leave the town, Ibrahim, he goes to the idol center. When he goes to that temple, Ibrahim destroys all of the idols, but he doesn't destroy the largest idol. So when all of them return, and they say to Ibrahim, Ma hada, O Ibrahim, what is this? Ibrahim says that go and ask the largest of the idols, in kanu yantiqun, if it is able to speak, go and ask it. You know, after Ibrahim says this, the Quran, it has a very interesting expression. The Quran, it says that when they hear this statement of Ibrahim, that go and ask the largest idol who destroyed all of the smaller ones because the largest one carried it out, the Quran, it says, فَرَجَعُوا إِلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ, that the moment Ibrahim said this, they returned to their selves. They returned to their understanding. They returned to their rationale. So over here you find this is one example. Another example in the life of Ibrahim is that one day it is stated that Ibrahim was with a group of individuals who would worship the celestial bodies. They would worship the moon, they would worship the sun, they would worship the stars. So Ibrahim, one day, he's standing outside with them. The moment one of the stars comes up, Ibrahim says that this is my Lord. Ibrahim, of course, he doesn't believe this. But Ibrahim is using jadal. He is discussing in a manner to allow them to understand. The moment that star it sets, Ibrahim says, Inni la uhibbul afilin. That which sets, in other words, that which has movement, that which comes and goes, that cannot be my Lord. The moon, it comes up, the same thing. The sun, it comes up, the same thing. So you find Ibrahim over here is using another rational argument. A third example of Ibrahim using rationality is that it's stated that one day Ibrahim, he says to Nimrud that my Lord Allah, he gives life and death. At that point, Nimrud says, I also give life and death. Ibrahim says, what do you mean that you give life and death? Nimrud had two people in front of him. He says, I order him to be executed, and I order him to be freed. In that manner, I am giving life and death. You know what Ibrahim says? Ibrahim says, now order the one who has been executed to come back to life. In other words, if you say that you are a creator, then at the very minimum, you must have this ability. So on one side, you find the Quran is showing that when it comes to aql and intellect, the intellect can establish belief in Tawheed. You know, if I asked you that, why do you believe in Allah? You can't say that I believe in Allah because the Prophet Muhammad told me that Allah exists. Because the authority of the Prophet Muhammad comes from the fact that he is the Nabi and the Rasul of Allah. I cannot say that Allah exists because the Quran says there is Allah. The value of the Quran is because it is the book of Allah. So that creates a door, it creates a vicious circle. So you find at one level you need the intellect and you need the aql. But there is another extremity as well. That other extremity is that there was a group of individuals that whenever there was a concept in the deen, they would say that what does aql and intellect have to say about it? You know, and one fine example of this is the discussion about religion and science. You know, when it comes to this discussion, there are two extremes. There is one party which was completely suspicious of science. That they said that science has no position in religion. When you look at the ayat of the Quran says reflect on the natural system. إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ آيَاتٌ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. That in the alteration of the day and the night, in all of these different things is signs for those who reflect. But then there was another group of individuals that they took their kashkul, they took their begging bowls in front of modern science. In other words, they would say that if Imam Sadiq has a hadith, what does modern science say about this hadith? And if there is wudu, what does modern science say about wudu? You see, this school of thought is a dangerous school of thought. You know, many individuals, may have heard of this book called The Quran, the Bible, and Science. There's an individual by the name of Maurice Bucaille. And the entire premise of that book is that because the Quran is in line with modern science, the Quran is the book of Allah. Now I'll rephrase that argument in a syllogism. That argument, it says, modern science is a hujjat. Modern science cannot be false. Because the Quran is in line with modern science, the Quran is the book of Allah. When you understand it from that angle, that is a ridiculous argument. Because it is placing modern science higher than the Quran as an epistemological source. You know, there is an ayat of the Quran. It talks about our sources of knowledge. That ayat of the Quran, it says, that Allah, Wallahu akhrajakum min butuni ummahatikum la ta'lamuna shay'a. That when Allah, He brought you forth from the wombs of your mothers, you didn't know anything. وَجَعَلَ لَكُمُ السَّمْعَ وَالْأَبْصَارَ وَالْأَفْئِدَةَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ. But when Allah, He created you, and He brought you from the wombs of your mothers, you knew nothing. But He created the hearing so you can gain knowledge. And He created for you vision so you can gain knowledge. But then after that, the Quran, it says, Allah, He created the hearts of an individual so that they can thank Allah. You cannot thank Allah unless you understand Allah. So this ayat is showing that the heart of an individual has a capacity to gain ilm as well. That is why Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, Imam Sadiq in a hadith, he says, Man amila bima alim, kufiya bima lam ya'lam. That the one who acts upon that ilm and that knowledge he has, Allah will suffice him in that knowledge that he doesn't have. In that sense, it is showing that knowledge as a source is much more than just the five senses and empiricism as modern science says. But knowledge in the truest sense is a nur, as Imam Sadiq says, that لَيْسَ الْإِلْمُ بِالتَّعَلُّمِ إِنَّمَا هُوَ نُورٌ يَقَعُ فِي قَلْبِ مَنْ يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ تَبَارَكَ وَتَعَالَى أَن يَهْدِيَهُ. In the truest sense, knowledge is a light which Allah places in the hearts of the ones whom He wants to guide. And that true reality of knowledge comes through iman, it comes through action as well. So in that sense, knowledge is much more profound than the modern understanding of knowledge. So you find on one side, this is that reality. But when it comes to the intellect, when it comes to understanding, as I said, that even though on one side there is a limit to the intellect, as I mentioned, there are many uses of the intellect as well, and one of those areas is aqaid and belief. I gave you several examples of the Quran establishing belief in Allah by appealing to the aql and the intellect. The same way you see this in the seerah of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. You know, it's stated that after the battle of Siffin, one of the individuals who was killed on the side of Amir al-Mu'mineen in the battle of Siffin was Ammar ibn Yasir. And there was a famous hadith of Rasulullah where Rasulullah, he says, Ammar taqtuluhul fi'atul baghiya, that a baghi, a rebellious, a oppressive group will kill Ammar ibn Yasir. Now Ammar ibn Yasir is killed on the side of Amir al-Mu'mineen. This immediately poses a problem for the other side. So you know what the other side began to say? The other side began to say it is Ali who killed Ammar, because Ali brought Ammar to this battle. And because Ammar came for Ali ibn Abi Talib, in reality he is the one who killed Ammar ibn Yasir. Now how did Amir al-Mu'mineen reply? Amir al-Mu'mineen didn't bring out any ayat of the Quran. He didn't bring out any hadith of Rasulullah. But Amir al-Mu'mineen replied by using aql and intellect. The Imam, he says to those individuals that if you are making this claim that I am the one who killed Ammar because Ammar was fighting on my side, then Rasulullah is the one who killed Hamza on the day of Uhud. Because Sayyid al-Shuhada Hamza came to fight on the side of Rasulullah and he died fighting for Rasulullah. If you are going to use this logic, then I will reply with this logic. So you find Amir al-Mu'mineen is using aql and rationale. No, I'll give you another example. It's stated one day, an individual from Syria, he comes to the companion of Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. And he comes to that companion by the name of Hisham ibn al-Hakam. When he comes to Hisham ibn al-Hakam, he comes all the way from Syria. Hisham says, why have you come all the way from Syria? The man says, because I want to understand certain things about the religion. Hisham says very well, if you want to understand these things, let me ask you some questions. That the first question I have is that when Allah created this world, did He create it with a maqsad? Did He create it with a purpose? Or did He create it in abath, in vain, without a purpose? The man says, of course, Allah created it with a purpose. Then Hisham says, how do we know what that purpose is? The man says that we know that purpose because of the anbiya and the messengers would tell us that purpose. After that, you find Hisham says to him, okay, this works in the time of the messengers, but Rasulullah is passed away. How do we know that purpose now? He says we know it through the Quran and through the hadith of Rasulullah. He then says to him that, is the Quran and the Hadith enough to understand everything? At the point the man, he stops replying. He says, I'm in a predicament. The predicament is this, is that if I say that the Quran and the Hadith are enough to understand everything in the deen, I've come all the way from Syria because I don't understand something. But if I say that they are not enough, then it destroys my own position. The man then says to Hisham, then tell me, where do I gain this knowledge? Hisham, he points to the house of Imam as-Sadiq. And he says that there is no knowledge except that it comes from this household. So you see, in this manner, Ahlul Bayt themselves and the companions of Ahlul Bayt, they showed that when it comes to aqaid, there is a role of aqal. But even in aqaid and belief, there are many things which the aqal cannot understand. For example, if I told you that through your aqal, establish the stages of the hereafter, are you going to be able to do it? No. You are not going to be able to say that my aqal, it states that the first there will be the mizan, and then there will be the sirat, and then, for example, there will be this and this and this. No, you're not able to do it. So at one level, in aqaid, even though aqal can establish the basic principles, not every detail is established by aqal and intellect. And in that sense, you need a wahi, you need revelation, you need the hadith of Rasulullah, you need the hadith of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. So you find from this is the first level. Now the second level is the question that what role does aqal play in understanding the Shariat? You know, this is a very important discussion over here. Because many people, when you have a question and answer session, they'll ask questions such as that, why is a dog najis? We say to them, a dog is najis because the nusus and the text of the Shariat say it's najis. At the very basic level, we understand it is related to taharat. But at another level, you find there are many things in the Shariat that we submit to the Quran and the Hadith. For example, the text, it says that when you do masha on your foot, you are wiping the top of your foot. Arguably, logically, the bottom of your foot is dirtier than the top of your foot. But Ahlul Bayt, the Shari, Allah, Rasulullah, they told us that you do wudu in this manner, so we submit our intellects over there. So at that level, when it comes to the Shariat, even though ijma and aqal is a source for the Shariat, at the bottom level, the fundamental is the Quran and the Sunnah of Rasulullah. But at the second level, you find that even in this discussion, when our fuqaha and our jurists, they examine this level, they use their aqal to establish riwayat versus weak riwayat. For example, it's very famous that Sayyid al-Quri, there are certain narrations that say that Shahr Ramadan will only have 30 days. So Sayyid al-Khuri, he rejects these narrations based on the meanings of aqal. He says aqal, it shows that Shahr Ramadan is like any other month. And any other month can have 29 or 30 days. So in the sense, yes, a jurist is using aqal to one extent, to one had. But when it comes to the Shariat for us, we submit to the Shariat of Ahlul Bayt. And in that sense, when you look at the ayat of the Quran say, yes, mankind, ponder, use your intellect. But use your intellect in examining the system of creation and looking at the ayat of Allah. It doesn't say use your intellect when it comes to accepting the Shariat or rejecting the Shariat. So you find this is that second level. Now, as I come towards the end of my discussion, as time is running out, the final question is that can aqal be used to establish a society? In other words, when we have this community here at Zainabiyya in Atlanta, what role does aqal play in building this community? Over here, there are traditions from Ahlul Bayt which show that when you have your interactions with other individuals, you choose those interactions on the basis of aql and intellect. For example, there's a tradition of Imam Zainul Abidin, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. Imam Zainul Abidin, in this hadith, he says that do not befriend 5 types of individuals. 5 types of people, don't take them as your friend. And the Imam, he explains why you shouldn't take them as your friend via aql and intellect. For example, he says that do not take a liar and a kadhab as your friend. Because that liar is like a sarab, he is like a mirage. In other words, he'll look as if he is close to you, but he is the farthest from you. And he'll look as if he's distant from you, but in reality he is close to you. The Imam, he explains using rationale, but he says don't take him as a friend. Then the Imam, he says, do not take the bakhil and the stingy person as a friend. Why shouldn't you take the stingy person as a friend? Because that what you need the most, he won't give it to you. In other words, when you are in need, when you need that friendship, he won't help you. What is the point of that friendship? Then the Imam says, the third person that you should not take as a friend is a fasik. A person who doesn't have moral values, a person who is an open sinner. The reason you shouldn't take him as a friend is because that individual will sell you out at the first moment, using my own alfaz, paraphrasing the Imam's hadith. In other words, this individual has no values. When he notices that you're not able to do anything for him, then the first moment he'll sell you out. Then after that, the Imam, he says, do not take that person as a friend who cuts the ties with his family. فَإِنِّي وَجَدْتُهُ مَلْعُونًا فِي كِتَابِ اللَّهِ. I found this person to be cursed in the book of Allah. In other words, if that individual cannot respect his parents and his family, those individuals who are his blood relatives, how is he going to respect you as a friend? If he cannot respect those parents who created him, who were the wasila towards his birth, then how will he respect you as a friend? So in that manner, Imam Zainul Abidin is showing that when it comes to building the community, even their aql, it has a role. But when we look on the day of Ashura, we find that even though those on the side of Imam al-Hussein were people of understanding, that Burayr ibn Khudayr was from the Qurra and the reciters of the Quran, and Habib ibn Madahir was called a Rajul al-Faqih, an individual with understanding, the greatest quality of the ashab of Sayyid al-Shuhada wasn't their aql, but it was their taslim and their submission at the door of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. You see, this is that maqam which these individuals, they reach. They understand that yes, aql, it takes me to a point. But then one maqam it comes where I place my aql in submission to the teachings of Islam. And I place them in submission to wahi and revelation. And I place them in submission at the door of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. You know, when Harun al-Makki, he comes to Imam al-Sadiq. Imam al-Sadiq says to Harun al-Makki, go and sit in that tandoor. Go and sit in that oven. Harun al-Makki, he doesn't say, my aql, it says this. And my intellect, it says this. No, Harun al-Makki's aql, it said that if Ja'far al-Sadiq is telling me this, I'll go and sit in there. And when he goes and he sits in there, the Imam, he looks at Harun al-Makki. And if he says, if I had individuals like this individual, then you find our rulership would be there. And this is what the ashab of Sayyid al-Shuhada were. The ashab of Imam al-Hussein are those individuals that they would say, oh Imam, if you give us the hukum and the order right now, we'll place our heads before your feet, O Sayyid al-Shuhada. These are those companions that if they were not able to fight, they did the best to their capacity. That somebody like Sa'id al-Hanafi or Sa'id ibn Jubair, that he was an elderly individual, that some narrations, some historical records say he was more than 90 years old. That what is a 90-year-old going to do on a battlefield? But you know what Sa'id he does? When Imam al-Hussein stands up for Salat, Sa'id he stands in front of Sayyid al-Shuhada. And arrow after arrow is going into the body of Sa'id. And as Imam al-Hussein he finishes that Salat, Sa'id he says, Assalamu alayka yabna Rasulallah. That salam be upon you, the grandson of Rasulullah. So you find this is that quality of submission that we see in the companions of Ahlul Bayt. But without a doubt, one of the greatest examples of taslim on the day of Ashura was Sayyida Zainab. You know, it's stated that you know what the heart of a mother is. But when the bodies of Aun and Muhammad are brought in front of Sayyida Zainab, if you want to see the maqam of Sayyida Zainab looks at the body of her children and she says, Rabbana taqabbal minna hadal qurban. That, oh Allah, accept this qurbani from us. Accept this sacrifice from us. You know, this is that Zainab, that after the day of Ashura, every moment of the life of Zainab was in remembrance of Sayyid al-Shuhada. To the extent that when she comes on the 11th of Muharram to the body of Imam al-Hussein, it's stated that when she looks at that body, she says, As-salamu ala al-Hussein al-Madloom. That salam be upon my oppressed and my Madloom brother Hussein. Al-Maqtul, al-Majruh, al-Atshana, al-Madhboom min al-Qafa. She says, salam be upon my brother, that when he was wounded, he was thirsty on the day of Ashura. When they wounded my brother and they cut the neck of my brother Hussein, they didn't cut the neck of Hussein from the front. Al-Madhboom min al-Qafa. From the back of the neck, they cut the neck of my brother. Alladhi ghusluhu damu wa kafanuhu rimalul Karbala. That the ghusl of my brother was done with the blood from his body. And his kafan was the khak of Karbala. After that, Sayyida Zainab, she leaves. You know, as Sayyida Zainab is leaving, she begins to go towards Kufa. It's stated when this caravan, it reaches Kufa, there were many individuals who would come, they would meet with Ahlul Bayt. As they're meeting with Ahlul Bayt, it's stated that one lady, she goes to the daughter of Imam al-Hussein by the name of Sakina. And when she goes to Sakina, she says that I have brought sadaqah for you. At that point, Sayyida Zainab says, oh lady, we are from the household of Ahlul Bayt. That sadaqah is haram for us. That lady says, then can this girl make a dua for me? Sayyida Zainab says, oh Sakina, make whatever dua she wants. That lady, she looks at Sakina and she says that in the way you are yatim, pray that my children don't become yatim. Then she says that in the way you are asir and a captive, pray that my children don't see such a day. But then after that she says that make dua that I get to go towards Medina. The moment Sayyida Zainab, she hears Medina, she says, oh lady, who do you know in Medina? She says, I know the house of Ali. I know the house of Fatima. Sayyida Zainab says, oh lady, who do you
know in that house. She says, I know Zainab, I know Hussein. Sayyida Zainab says, oh Habiba, do you not recognize Zainab, oh Habiba? And oh Habiba, if you want to know Hussein, that is the head of Hussein, which is being taken through the streets of Kufa. على لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. Ya Allah, through the right of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad, wherever the followers of Ahlul Bayt are in difficulty, help them. Wherever they're sick and ailing, cure them. Ya Allah, keep us upon the path of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. Grant us the shifa of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. Allow us to see the hastening and the reappearance of the 12th of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. I pray for the success of this community. I pray for the guidance of this community. I pray that Allah continues to give us tawfiq to your resident alim, Maulana Sayyid Nafis Taqvi. And I pray for the rest of the congregants of this Jama'ah. Ya Allah, we pray once again for the hastening of the reappearance of the master of our time, Matam Hussein.
Hussein, Ya 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 Hussein.
سر سے چادر اتر گئی بھیا قیامت گزر گئی بھیا قیامت گزر گئی بھیا سر سے چادر اتر گئی بھیا قیامت گزر گئی بھیا قیامت گزر گئی بھیا آپ کے بعد آئی جو آندھی آپ کے بعد آئی جو آندھی ہم کو برباد کر گئی بھیا قیامت گزر گئی بھیا قیامت گزر گئی بھیا خاک ہو کر تمہاری سب دولت 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 کربلا میں بکھر گئی بھیا قیامت گزر گئی بھیا قیامت گزر گئی بھیا حلق اصغر کے ساتھ چشم رباب 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 زخموں سے بھر گئی بھیا قیامت گزر گئی بھیا قیامت گزر گئی بھیا ہائے پرسا نحال تک نہ ملا 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 جس جگہ بھی نظر گئی بھیا قیامت گزر گئی بھیا قیامت گزر گئی بھیا اس سے پہلے کہ تیرا سر کٹتا اس سے پہلے کہ تیرا سر کٹتا یہ بہن کیوں نہ مر گئی بھیا یہ قیامت گزر گئی بھیا یہ قیامت گزر گئی بھیا ہائے اپنوں نے بھی نہ پہچانا 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 سر کھلے میں جدھر گئی بھیا قیامت گزر گئی بھیا قیامت گزر گئی بھیا سر سے چادر اتر گئی بھیا یا حسین
یا حسین یا حسین اما فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں اما فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں اما فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں کیسا ہے یہ چراغا دل ڈوبے جا رہے ہیں کیا شام آ گیا ہے اما فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں اما فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں نیزوں پہ جتنے سر ہیں ایک سر ہے ان میں ایسا آنکھیں ہیں بند اس کی اور خاک پر ہے گرتا عباس کا یہ سر ہے تیور بتا رہے ہیں کیا شام آ گیا ہے اما فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں اما فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں ماں کی گودیوں سے لپٹے ہوئے ہیں بچے ہیں ہاتھ رسیوں میں ماں کے ایسے جکڑے بچے جو گر رہے ہیں وہ مرتے جا رہے ہیں کیا شام آ گیا ہے اما فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں اما فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں ہونے لگی اذانیں کیسے سروں کو ڈھانپیں بازو بندھے ہوئے ہیں خون رو رہی ہیں آنکھیں آنکھوں کے خون سے راستے خون میں نہا رہے ہیں کیا شام آ گیا ہے اماں فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں اماں فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں لوگ کس طرح کے ہم سے دعا کرائیں اے قیدیوں دعا دو یہ دن نہ ہم پہ آئیں لے کر دعائیں ہم سے دل بھی دکھا رہے ہیں کیا شام آ گیا ہے اماں فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں اماں فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں اتنا چلے ہیں پیدل کانٹوں پہ سارے قیدی تھک جاتی چلتے چلتے چلتی اگر زمین بھی پاؤں کے آبلے بھی آنسو بہا رہے ہیں کیا شام آ گیا ہے اماں فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں اماں فضا بتا دے مجھ کو پتھر کیوں آ رہے ہیں ریحان قیدیوں میں برپا ہے شور گریا بالوں سے کر رہی تھی ماتم جو بنت زہرا سجاد نوحہ کھاں ہیں نوحہ سنا رہے ہیں کیا شام آ گیا ہے اماں فضا
متوجہ زیارت صلی اللہ علیہ یا رسول اللہ السلام علیک یا نبی اللہ السلام علیک یا امیر المؤمنین السلام علیک یا فاطمة الزہراء سیدۃ النساء العالمین السلام علیک یا ابا محمد الحسن السلام علیک یا ابا عبداللہ وعلی الارواح التي حلت بفنائک عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى